It's good to see us trying to work our relationship through, but things are not going to be the way they were for the last 80 years. This is a different United States, and these are different times, and we're going to have to feel our way through to a different kind of relationship, and that includes trade.
Kurt Schlichter, a former US Army colonel and a political commentator and author, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I want to get into this exciting news between the US and the UK to start off. There will be an announcement later on today between Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer where they're set to announce a trade deal between the two countries. We don't know the ins and the outs just yet. We know that it might affect the steel and aluminium trade deal, so that might happen with those two industries, but we're not quite sure exactly the ins and the outs. But what we do know is that this might do a good thing to bring these two allies back together after what's been, I guess, a tumultuous few months since Donald Trump announced these tariffs. So what's your take on this announcement that there might be a trade deal between the US and UK?
Well, I'm a little surprised because among the hardcore conservatives in the United States, I've got to say, British stock has dropped precipitously. We feel that the British have not been keeping up their side of the bargain as far as the special relationship in terms of the military. I just did some checking. You guys have 32,000 people in your Navy. I'm about to go see Simple Minds, your English band from long ago because I'm old, at a stadium that has 17,000 people. So one stadium can hold about half of your entire Navy, and 62 commissioned ships, just not cutting it. The other thing is, I'm not sure the British appreciate just how angry American conservatives are over the attacks on free speech in Britain. We are extremely troubled by it, and I think it's a good thing that we're rebuilding the relationship. This is a good step, but the British folks need to understand there are a lot of Americans who are not particularly happy about the way our allies, including the British, but also Germans, French, etc., our relationships going. There's a lot of simmering resentment there.
Well, of course, it's hard to compare the amount of troops in the Navy and in the Army, I guess, just in terms of population size. You obviously have a lot larger population, Kurt, but you're absolutely correct. One of the things that Donald Trump has done well is push the EU, push the UK into taking their defense more seriously and to putting more money into defense, especially when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, and having less reliance on the United States. So you're correct in that, but Trump said that there will be more deals to come with more allies. And I wonder if you believe that Donald Trump felt the backlash, or if he felt from these allies, but more so if he felt that Americans were beginning to believe that they would bear the brunt of these extra costs when it comes to implementing these tariffs.
Well, it's very interesting the way the tariff issue has developed, because it's usually the American conservatives who are anti-tariff and an American left that's pro-tariff. But, of course, everything's different when Donald Trump comes along. It's the Trump exception. So you have a bunch of very liberal American politicians who are suddenly all in on free trade. They're practically Milton Friedman. They are Adam Smith all the way, suddenly, because Trump's allegedly not. Now Trump's plan was always to change the post-war relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. After World War II, we were undamaged. We hadn't been bombed. We had not gone through two world wars where entire generations were essentially wiped out. So we took it on ourselves to help rebuild the rest of the world. And one of the ways we did it was allowing non-reciprocal trade agreements. We would have less favorable trade agreements for American products than American products coming in. And it's been 80 years. And Donald Trump and many Americans are saying, okay, now it's time to even things up. Now it's time to get on a more reciprocal footing. And that was always the goal. Trump was not trying to end trade. Trump was trying to make trade what he perceives, and many Americans perceive, as more fair trade. And I'm glad that the United Kingdom, for which we came from, Sorry about that whole revolution thing, which began 250 years ago last month. We've had this special relationship for a long time. I know in Desert Storm, there was an entire British division in the Corps I was in, and I worked with Brits in Kosovo. It's good to see us trying to work our relationship through, but things are not going to be the way they were for the last 80 years. This is a different United States, and these are different times, and we're going to have to feel our way through to a different kind of relationship, and that includes trade.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Kurt, because it was interesting when you look at the situation through a glance, because tariffs, when we looked at tariffs and we saw how many tariffs Donald Trump was hoping to implement, it did force you to look at the situation between the United States and each country. It did force you to see that there were some pretty unfair deals for the United States, that they had been quite generous in some aspects. So I think a lot of people would say that tariffs, from Donald Trump's point of view, were correct. They were needed, but perhaps not so many at the one time. So perhaps the April announcement was a good way for Donald Trump to get everyone's attention. And now he can start...
He did that.
Yeah, now he can start divvying out these deals that actually benefit both countries. So we'll see how that goes forward. But I want to get your thoughts, and especially your thoughts from someone who has expertise in this area after 27 years serving in the US military and years after serving in the reserves, as you mentioned before we started recording. But there are reports from Reuters that the United States and Israel are in early talks to have Washington take over the administration of the Gaza Strip that Trump might announce in the next few days before he goes to the Middle East for his trip this week. So it would basically see the US leading a transitional government until there's a safe, secure government established in Palestine, which of course won't include Hamas. The US operated a similar situation in 2003 in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was out of power. So do you think this would be a good idea for the US to lead this transitional government?
I think it would be a terrible idea to put American boots on the ground in Gaza. The Hamas terrorists murdered they murdered over 1,000 Israelis, but they also murdered Americans. And we cannot let that stand. We don't owe the Palestinians anything. If I had my way, the Israelis would have gone and cleaned this out on approximately October 8th. I don't want to see any of my money going to help or rebuild the Palestinians. I don't want to see any more American lives, because we already lost one American soldier putting up a humanitarian pier through an accident. The Palestinians are unworthy of American blood and treasure. I have no desire to help them. And I think many Americans feel that way. It is not our problem. It's their problem. They caused it, and they can suffer through the consequences. Certainly no American peacekeepers, but I would not spend a dollar rebuilding the damage that they caused to be inflicted upon themselves.
Well, Trump said that he would probably resort to getting donations from other countries. It wouldn't fall just on the back of Americans, because, of course, that would go against everything he campaigned on, especially when it came to funding Ukraine. But, Kurt, obviously, the war is not the result of innocent Palestinians. It's the result of Hamas, as so many conservatives have said, and Israelis have said as well. But
well, I refuse to care more about the Palestinians than the Palestinians care about themselves. Okay. If you start a war, you're asking for the consequences.
Well, the 2 million Gazans in Gaza didn't start this war, but Kurt,
their brothers and fathers and friends did.
All members of Hamas.
No, the Palestinians supported the war. It's their problem. It's theirs to solve.
Okay. Donald Trump's, he said he wasn't ruling out boots on the ground because he got a lot of backlash from conservatives.
Oh, he will get a lot of backlash. Yeah.
So
yes, not one American life for the Gazans.
Of course.
Not one.
And we saw Republicans in his own party come out and say that they would not support sending soldiers to
Absolutely
Gaza.
Not.
But can you...
my test has always been, can I go to the mother of a paratrooper at a farm outside of Nebraska and say, your son died because of X, Y, Z. And if I can do that with a straight face, then it's a mission that we can be a part of. But I can't explain why an American should give up his life for the Palestinians at this point. So my feeling is no, never, nothing.
And you don't believe that the US would be able to orchestrate a transitional government in Gaza without troops on the ground?
I think that would be very difficult, but if we're going to have a diplomatic role, that's one thing. Of course, there's many elements of national power: diplomatic, information, military, and economic. We're strong in all of those. But I think you're going to find that American conservatives are 100% military off the table. We will. I cannot imagine us supporting any kind of peacekeeping mission. And I've been on peacekeeping. I did a peacekeeping mission in Kosovo. Sometimes they're very important, and sometimes they're very useful. I don't see the American interest, either utilitarian or moral, in helping the Gazans be relieved of the consequences of their decisions.
Kurt, do you think that sentiment that you're saying was exacerbated after Biden's removal of troops in Afghanistan? Do you think that
Yes.
forever war,
Yes.
that horrible botched withdrawal of troops, do you think that that exacerbated that feeling that no, there are some wars, there are some battles that we don't need to involve ourselves in?
Absolutely. We should have done what you Brits did in dealing with Afghanistan, which is go in on a punitive mission and punish the folks who decide to come and kill 3,000 Americans and others. Instead, we decided we were going to teach these 7th century barbarians how to be a democracy. And of course, that went terrible. Now, I'm a little biased. I didn't serve in Afghanistan, but as a lawyer, I represented the family of one of the Marines killed at Kabul airport by a terrorist bomb. And I watched that family. I watched that family cry over their lost son. And later, another son of theirs committed suicide. People think of these things as hypothetical, as theoretical. I think of dead soldiers, and many Americans who served feel the same way. This is a very different America than it was 20, 25 years ago.
In what way do you think, when it comes to the military, or it comes to involving the United States involving itself in conflicts outside of their own land?
There's a great reluctance now for Americans to involve themselves in the squabbles and battles of other peoples. We cannot be the world's policeman. We're the most powerful military in the world, the most powerful military in human history, probably. We can project power like no one else can. As I wrote in one of my books, power is having a battalion of Abrams tanks. Superpower is being able to move a corps of Abrams tanks across the globe and then fight it and win. We are a superpower, but we can't fix everybody's problems. And it's not our responsibility to. It is not the responsibility of some American kid from Alabama to go figure out, the problems in, Eastern Europe, except to the extent that we've agreed to do so through our treaty obligations, such as NATO. So, and many Americans feel that way, and a lot of it's not all the fault of the foreigners. It's America's fault too, because we had a terrible, terrible strategic set of strategic thinking over the last 30 years. We have not won a war, unequivocally won a war decisively in 30 years, which is the result of our kind of establishment. Our foreign policy establishment is typically wrong about almost everything. I think now under Marco Rubio and the State Department, we're starting to get back on track. But we went into Iraq and in Afghanistan with terrible strategies that got a lot of our people killed and didn't get the outcomes that we wanted. And a lot of Americans ask, why did my kid come home in a box for this? And that's a good question. It's a legitimate question. And Donald Trump's the first politician who really, asked it too.
Yeah. And yeah, and I agree with you, Kurt, that especially for those families, the one that you represented who was killed by a bombing in the Kabul airport, there's so many of those families and there's been hearings into them, and they're really interesting to watch for anyone who's interested in that botched withdrawal out of
Yep.
Afghanistan. It is so interesting to watch those families talk about how the deaths of their loved ones affected them and how it was
Yes.
just such a scramble and such a preventable situation. And of course, $3 billion worth of military equipment left behind in
Ah,
Afghanistan, left to
unbelievable.
terrorists. But we're going to move on because I want to get your thoughts on this situation coming out of Columbia University. The NYPD has arrested dozens, around 80 protesters who partook in this pro-Palestine or anti-Israeli protest at Columbia University inside the Butler library. Basically, the NYPD were called because the protesters weren't moving along. They were refusing to leave, so they were arrested for trespassing. Now, it's been over a year since these pro-Palestine protests began across a lot of these Ivy League universities, and this one being quite a large one. So I wanted to get your reaction to this.
Look, these are moral illiterates who hate America and hate the West. Many of them are student activists from other countries who've come here. I don't understand why we let them in. We should certainly deport them. And a lot of them are foolish college students, particularly the kids of rich people, who, again, are moral illiterates who, have generally empty lives and have decided this is the way they'll fill them up. I am all for tossing, we have our First Amendment here. You can stand out and say the stupidest things you want. You can sit there and cheer on October 7th until tomorrow. I'm going to call you an idiot. But you don't get to walk into a library and occupy. You don't get to occupy buildings. You certainly do not get to tell Jewish students where and when they can be on campus. And we're going to put a stop to that. The only difference between these, keffiyeh-wearing morons and idiots who wore hoods 50 years ago to keep blacks out of school is time and the choice of the people they hate.
And we did see many videos of Jewish students being told that they were Zionists. We saw a lot of the furniture in the library being defaced. So again, this message of humanity, it's not necessarily coming across in the way that these protesters think that it is. But Donald Trump revoked that $400 million of government funding to Columbia University, an Ivy League university. This resulted in the uni having to lay off around 180 staff members. Columbia University says that they're still working with the Trump administration in the hopes to have that money restored, but that hopes to have the money restored was an article from only a few days ago, Kurt. And then, of course, we had Wednesday's protest erupt yesterday. Do you think the Trump administration would be looking at this situation thinking there's no way they're getting this $400 million back?
Oh, I wouldn't give them a penny. It's well established in American law that if you're allowing systematic violations of the Civil Rights Act, which the anti-Semitic activities of these people certainly are, you will not get government funds, you will not get tax exemptions, and it's about time to leverage it against our Ivy Leagues, which our Ivy League colleges, the best of the best colleges allegedly, although their status has certainly fallen as they've embraced woke admission policies and stopped admitting on merit, as well as teaching truth rather than indoctrinating. It's good that Trump is starting with them. Okay, so he can't be, when you go after Harvard, which has a $53 billion endowment, it's more of a hedge fund with an attached campus than vice versa. You're not punching down. You're punching at a cultural equal. And you're not bullying somebody. You are facing off with somebody in the ring. And we're going to resolve this in the United States. There is no way that normal Americans, who may work, fixing air conditioners or teaching elementary school or selling cars or whatever, should be subsidizing these academic institutions which are dedicated to undermining the most basic principles of the United States. So I'm very glad to see it. And they're going to make bad choices and attempt to resist the inevitable. And they're going to lose their money. And I think this is more the disruption that we're seeing with Donald Trump in kind of the post-war arrangements in America and across the world. Trump is really a disruptive force, and I don't mean disruptive necessarily in a bad way, but he's fundamentally transforming the way Americans react to the rest of the world and are reacting to each other internally.
We saw Kurt's Secretary of State Marco Rubio respond to these protesters, saying that we're reviewing the visa status of the trespassers and vandals who took over Columbia University. Pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our great nation. This, of course, coupled with the fact that ICE is now fingerprinting any of those that were arrested to see their visa status. So do you think by revoking a visa, a right to work and live in the United States, is taking it too far from the US government, or do you think that this is the right reaction?
Well, it's the right remedy to the problem of letting them into the United States in the first place. We're under no moral obligation to take in these people. They hate America. They hate Americans. They hate certain groups of Americans in particular. We don't need them. We don't want them. They've got no right to be here. And they need to get the hell out. Look, America let in about 20 million people illegally. And that's especially pronounced in California and Texas, where I live. But it's all over the country. And there is a marked difference between somebody coming in from Mexico who wants to work in construction, just get paid and take care of his family. I get that. He still needs to be deported. But I'm not angry at him. I am angry at people who come to my country, hate my country, want the death of the West, want 7th century barbarism to prevail. That does make me angry, and they can't be booted out anywhere quick enough.
I want to get your thoughts on Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary. On Monday, he ordered the Pentagon to reduce the number of 4-star officers by 20%. As you would know, this is the military's highest ranking officers and generals. His reasoning, he said, through these measures, we will uphold our position as the most lethal fighting force in the world, achieving peace through strength and ensuring greater efficiency, innovation, and preparedness for any challenge that lies ahead. Now, in layman's terms, my understanding is that by getting rid of those top officials, you're leaving room for more actual soldiers on the ground. So when you're looking at this as someone who served for 27 years, is Pete Hegseth, who's someone who also served, is that the right intention? Is that the right move by ordering that 20% reduction?
It absolutely is. Look, Pete Hegseth is coming in and doing what I think is the most important thing that any leader as Secretary of Defense can do, which is come back and get a military mindset, a military culture. For so long, especially under Obama and Biden, the military got dragged into this whole woke nonsense where we're more concerned with bizarre social pathologies than with doing the basic job of the American military, which is to deter people from messing with America and Americans, and if they do, killing them in great, towering heaps. There's a huge, what we call a Jacksonian strain in the United States, which is we want to leave you alone, but if you cross us, we're going to kill you and everybody you ever met. And that is really how many Americans feel. And we need a military that can do that. He's doing a lot of great things, including by setting the example. He's very physically fit. He's getting out there. He's exercising with the troops. Troops are seeing that. Enlistments are up 100 and some percent because young men and women in America want to be part of an elite organization. They want to stand with the heroes of America's past and be their equal. Nobody wants to come in and, a military full of, bizarre, woke DEI garbage, transsexual soldiers, all that crap. They don't want that. They want to be in a fighting force that they can be proud of. They want to be American warriors. And that's what he's bringing back. Getting rid of the generals, great idea. Slim us down. Remember, a 4-star general comes with a headquarters. It's not just the general, it's about 300 people.
So it's too expensive, is what you're saying. It's too expensive.
It's very expensive, and it's slothful. It's slow. We had 17, I think it was 17 4-stars and 5-stars during World War II when we had 12 million Americans under arms. And we did okay in World War II, I think. That was a pretty unequivocal win. I think we did okay. Are we doing much better with, a couple hundred 4-stars and 3-stars? I've got to say no. I was in the last major unequivocal victory of the United States. I was in the Gulf War. And, I think after almost 35 years, I think it's time to get back to that and get back to a military that takes care of business.
Yeah, so it's like it's just as a normal business would operate, Kurt, it's just slimming down management, getting too many high up people out.
Yep.
And putting more soldiers in lower who actually are in combat. So
yes,
it's an interesting thing, and despite the fact that obviously Pete Hegseth has had so much backlash for his role, he does have the experience of being a member of the army that can kind of come and say, look, there's too many generals. We need to slash the amount of generals there are. But I want to get your thoughts on, because you said that there's a want to be in the army right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when we have Pete Hegseth, yes, that's something that a lot of people in the army would think was a good idea. But do you not think that Pete Hegseth put the lives of those soldiers at risk when he was involved in this Signalgate scandal? Do you believe that that did not do a service to the U.S. Army?
Oh, the whole thing was nonsense. Nobody was at risk. Nobody was going to get killed. And I'm very glad that the American establishment has suddenly discovered how important correctly managing classified information is. It's really convenient that they did when they wanted to use it as a cudgel to beat up one of their political opponents. But we've been spending years and years with enduring leaks, enduring politicians like Hillary Clinton, having thousands of important government details on her personal server. I mean, look, if Pete Hegseth did anything wrong, he's an amateur compared to these guys. But I do find it amusing that suddenly they're scandalized by this. And I've got to say, I don't care. They're not getting a scalp. They don't get to win. They don't get to take Pete Hegseth out of the picture. Remember, Pete Hegseth and a lot of these Trump administration officials terrify them because they're a threat to the status quo. And they want to be a threat to the status quo. The status quo has failed. America is not what it used to be, but it can be again. It's not economically where it was. You go to the heartland of the United States, you go to town after town that's just had the heart ripped out of it as the economic engine's been sent overseas to China and Asia and wherever else. Culturally, we're much worse. Our education, except in some of the red southern states, which are taking the lead in education because they're getting back to basics, is a disaster. America, I grew up in the I'm a Californian, so of course I'm optimistic. And I grew up in America in the 80s, and there was never any limit. I never thought for a minute that I couldn't be exactly what I wanted to be. And I have been. I got to be an Army officer. I got to write best-selling books. I got to start a law firm. I got to be a stand-up comedian. I could do anything I wanted. That's the glory of America. And young people don't feel that way today, but they can again. We can have another golden age like the 80s and 90s, and we're ready for it. And that's what Trump represents. Trump represents an America that's powerful, that's full of opportunity, that's bright and optimistic. That's what America should be. And that's what we're trying to get.
Well, I think that's what everyone in the United States wants, Kurt. I just think that a lot of people in whatever minority or whatever group they're in might not feel it. So, I mean,
I'm not sure everybody wants that.
Really?
I think there are a lot of people who are very invested in failure. And there are a lot of people. Look, we are a nation of we should be a nation of empowered citizens. But not everybody. But it's not to the advantage of many people in our politics and culture to have that kind of American populace. There are people out there who want Americans weak and reliant and obedient. Well, that's not in the cards. I don't. My chain of command is God, me, and nobody else. I'm an American citizen. I outrank everybody. And I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to be what I want. I'm going to carry the guns I want. I am not going to be limited. And Americans don't want to be limited in general. There are others who want Americans quiet, obedient, and just obey, pay your taxes, keep your mouth shut. No, not going to do it. That's what people don't understand about the Trump revolt, which is really what it was. Trump is a revolt against the status quo.
Well, you're singing the tune of the MAGA base, Kurt. So thank you for joining the Trump Report today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I hope I didn't blow too many people's minds.